My mother abandoned me for her newborn twins when I was 16. 17 years later, she returned, seeking my money, and I finally caught up with her. To understand the situation, my mom had me when she was 20. My biological father was never part of my life, as he and my mom were only together for a few months when she got pregnant. She gave him the option to leave, and he took it without hesitation. Since their separation was rather bitter, my mom decided not to ask for child support, and he didn't offer any either. This arrangement suited them both, as it meant they wouldn't have to see each other again. Fortunately, my grandparents were a great support to my mom, which allowed her to finish her studies and find a job. Throughout my childhood, my mom dated several men until, when I was around 8, she started a relationship with Harry, with whom she'd previously worked. After almost 3 years of dating, they got married. My relationship with Harry was cordial, though not particularly close. We didn't get along badly, we simply tolerated each other in the house. Years after their wedding, my mom got pregnant, news that made us all happy, including me. Looking back, I should have foreseen what was going to happen. But I was convinced that my mom would always be there for me. After all, she had overcome many difficulties to raise me, so I thought she wouldn't let all that effort be in vain by abandoning us. But she made it clear she was distancing herself from me. I thought it was temporary and things would improve, so I made an effort to support her during her pregnancy. However, I noticed that my presence irritated her, so I decided to keep a little distance so as not to bother her. But it seems I didn't make myself invisible enough, because 6 months after the twins were born, my mom and Harry asked to speak with me seriously. They explained that, with 2 babies to care for, they could no longer keep me at home. I had just turned 16, so legally they couldn't kick me out without getting into trouble. That's why they tried to subtly convince me, arguing that it was difficult for them to support such a large family with their limited income. Honestly, I don't think it was that difficult to support 2 adults, a teenager, and 2 babies with a salary of 2 web developers, which until then had allowed us to live comfortably. It was obvious they were lying, and they just wanted me gone, but still, I tried to find solutions to stay. I offered to get a job if money was the problem, but my mom replied that, more than anything, she wanted to save money and resources for the children who really deserved it more. At that moment, she didn't say the twins needed it more, but that they deserved it more than me. Those words were enough to make me see that I needed to leave, since clearly, they didn't want me. They didn't even tell me where I could go after leaving. They just pushed me in that direction because they wanted me gone, and they knew I had enough dignity to realize I wasn't wanted there. Their plan worked. Technically, they didn't kick me out in the strict sense since they didn't force me. But I consider it practically the same because they cornered me, until I felt I had no other choice. After leaving that day, I went straight to my grandparents' house. They were very upset with my mom's behavior, but they maintained contact with her, so as not to lose their relationship with the twins. Since my grandparents were already elderly, I obviously couldn't depend on them financially, so I had to find a part-time job at 16. Occasionally, I saw my mom and Harry when they visited my grandparents with the kids, but they almost never asked about me, and when we coincided, they were very formal. It was obvious they didn't miss me, and they even seemed happier without me at home. My mom was much less irritable than before, which hurt me deeply, but there was nothing I could do. I lived with my grandparents until I started college. Even then, my mom remained distant, and I had to rely on some friends to settle into the dorm, as my grandparents weren't physically able to help me. I needed to take out a student loan, and for that, I had to resort to a relative as a cosigner because my mom and Harry refused with the same old excuse. They wanted to save their resources and money for their children's future, since they'd had the twins later in life. I was lucky that one of my uncles offered to be the cosigner, on the sole condition that I promised him he'd never have to pay anything because of that. I worked throughout college while studying to ensure I didn't miss any payments. After graduating and having a solid financial base at the beginning of my professional career, I had practically no contact with my mom, and at my graduation, only my grandparents attended. My mom didn't even bother to congratulate me. After graduating, I started working and became independent, because I didn't want to be a burden on my grandparents. The first few years were very hard because my salary was low, but I had to cover rent, food, utilities, start paying my debt, and also try to save something for the future. Those were truly limited finances, but fortunately, that's no longer the case. I worked my way up in the company, and although it wasn't easy and it took a long time, I'm now in a fairly comfortable position. I don't want to bore you with details, but I'm proud of how far I've come, especially considering I barely had any help. I enjoy a good standard of living, and surprisingly, despite not having had contact with me for years, my mom found out about it. I'm now almost 33, and hold a significant management position in the same company where I started. About 4 months ago, I received a major promotion, although I kept it private and told very few people. One of the people I told was my uncle because, as I wanted to thank him for co-signing my loan when I was struggling to figure out how to pay for college. From what I understand, he recently ran into my mom and Harry at a family gathering, and suggested they get in touch with me to congratulate me after so many years, since finally, things were going well for me in life. I know he had good intentions, but things didn't turn out as expected because they definitely didn't contact me to congratulate me. The thing is, my mom found out, and recently she showed up at my house with Harry demanding to speak with me. As I've already mentioned, since I started college, I had no contact with her, and after graduating, I decided there was no point in waiting for the day my mom would come to her senses and try to fix things. So I blocked her everywhere and completely cut her out of my life. She didn't seem affected by it either. In fact, I doubt she even noticed. I barely kept in touch with anyone in my family except my grandparents, who knew I didn't like talking about my mom, so they avoided mentioning her. As for my uncle, I didn't keep much contact with him either, so I didn't know that for the past few years. My mom and Harry have been going through financial difficulties. I learned about this recently when they showed up at my house and began telling me how difficult everything had been for them. I only let them in because I thought they were finally coming to mend things with me. But I guess that was naive thinking. Instead of congratulating me on my accomplishments, they began by saying they'd heard from my uncle about my significant promotion, and that I was one of the youngest people in that position at my company, and they were surprised that I hadn't told them anything.